Okay, welcome to the third video related to Chapter 6, the focus of which is motivating others. Okay, I am on the top of page 5 of our lecture outline, D. This is D, which is part of the elements of an effective motivation program. Okay, as it says in D, the relationship between performance and outcomes requires the leader to reinforce performance-enhancing behavior. Why? Well, because the best kinds of rewards are those that encourage high personal performance consistent with organizational objectives. So, one of the most important things to understand about reinforcement is something called the law of effect. This was articulated by a guy named E.L. Thorndike around 1906. And he said that people change their behavior. They learn by repeating behaviors that are reinforced and not repeating behaviors that are not reinforced. We move toward pleasure and away from pain. So basically, on some level at least, we're hedonists, where things that we get rewarded for doing, we'll do those again. And things where we don't get a reward, yeah, we might not be as likely to do those things again. Now, when I say reward, it's very, very important that we're all on the same page here. Rewards can be money, they could be advancement, they could be praise, they could be getting a better parking spot, they could be not having to do something you don't like to do. There are all different kinds of rewards, all different kinds of reinforcers. What matters, and this is very, very important, what matters is, does the person that we are hoping who will be motivated, does that person perceive what we're offering as reinforcing? Do they see that as a positive thing? Okay, that's key. If they don't, doesn't matter. It's not going to reinforce their behavior. For example, I don't like to be publicly praised. And so if someone publicly praises me for something, yeah, I'm actually less likely to do that thing again. Other people love to be publicly praised. And for them, praising them at, let's say, a ceremony, that's fantastic. That will encourage them to engage in that behavior again. So here's what really matters. As a manager, you need to find out, as a leader, you need to find out what actually makes my people tick, what really makes them happy. Okay, so reinforcement, how do we think about this? There's positive reinforcement. Everybody's heard about that. This is when you give something good, again, as perceived by the follower, in response or in exchange for good performance. So that's really simple, right? You do a good thing, you finish a project on time, I give you a bonus. Fantastic. That's positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is taking away something bad, again, as perceived by the follower, in response to good performance or in exchange for good performance. Now note, negative reinforcement is not punishment, not in any way. Average person might say that it is, but that's because they don't understand what negative reinforcement is. They've only talked about it colloquially. Negative reinforcement, a good example of this would be, let's say a person hates working on Friday afternoons in the summer because they like to get their weekend started as early as possible. So they hate it. So what you say to the person is, well, you know what? If you finish the project on time, you could take Friday afternoon off. Basically, taking away something bad, which is having to be there on Friday, in exchange for having done something good, which was getting the project done perhaps early. Okay. Most sustainable outcomes. How do we get the most sustainable performance? Not by reinforcing a person every single time they do something right, but rather by giving that reinforcement sporadically. Okay, we don't want it to be constant. We don't want it to be in response to every single demonstration of good behavior. If I said, that's amazing, every single time somebody said something good, that would get kind of annoying, wouldn't it? And what you need to think about instead is, what kind of reward system keeps people actively behaving the way that is desired? And a good example is lottery. So how do we get people to consistently buy lottery tickets? Yeah, we don't pay out all the time, or we don't pay out anything meaningful all the time. A casino. If you have slot machines, how do we get people to sit there all day sometimes and continue plugging away their money? Don't pay out all the time. Every once in a while, pay out. It should be a surprise. No one should be able to predict exactly when it will happen. And so as a result, they want to keep doing the good stuff in order to hopefully, maybe, possibly, eventually get paid out. So as a leader, as a manager, you don't want to reinforce every single instance of good behavior, but rather sporadically. All right, punishment is something else entirely, okay? And this is when you give something bad or you take away something good, again, as perceived by the follower, in response to bad performance. So the person has done something wrong. I'm either going to give something bad, okay, or I'm going to take away something that they consider to be good. So in the latter case, maybe I make it so they don't get their full salary for that week. They don't get I send them home without pay, okay? That would be taking away something good. Or giving something bad would be, I give them a job that they hate to do because they haven't performed their regular job at a high level. So I assign them to working with someone I know they hate to work with, for example. In order for punishment to work, it has to be intense, again, as perceived by the follower. It has to be swift, delivered at the time of the mistake, the bad behavior. It has to be impersonal. It has to be focused on the behavior, not on the person, and it has to be consistent across followers. And if any of these four is not observed, punishment is not likely to work. Okay. So it says, number 4 on page 5, by using rewards as reinforcers, managers directly link performance to valued outcomes. We need to make the linkage clear in the person's mind. I did this good thing. I got this good thing. Awesome. Nice. Managers' actions can also serve as reinforcers as they encourage initiative taking and creating motivating interactions with employees. Really, the point here is that managers get what they reinforce, which may not be what they say they want. So, you say a good example that's provided in the text, basically, I want people to be creative. I want them to come up with really great, crazy ideas, things that we've never heard before, things that we've never tried before. And then you turn around and you basically only reward people who don't take risks, people who come up with the same answers that we always have. Well, people are pretty smart. If they figure out that the best way to get a reward is to just do the same old, guess what they're going to do? The same old. It doesn't matter if you say, but I want creative. Yeah, but what are you rewarding people for? The same old. So you should expect the same old. Okay. Top of page 6, number 6. Managers, it says, must also use rewards and discipline appropriately they have to avoid ignoring. In other words, that's when the manager makes no response to the negative employee behavior. And we already talked about this, right? You can't avoid termination if that ends up being what you have to do. You can't avoid disciplining people if that's what you need to do. You have to take care of business. If you don't, if you just ignore that bad behavior, if you just pretend like it's not happening, well then basically the person will perceive that you're okay with their bad behavior, that in fact you're reinforcing their bad behavior, and they'll continue to engage in that bad behavior. Okay, second, you have to employ disciplining. Basically, sometimes we got to punish people if necessary. As it says, negative responses that discourage future occurrences of poor behavior. This is an absolute necessity when people are engaged in bad behavior. As a manager, as a leader, there are no excuses for avoiding conflict. That's what you're getting paid for. You're getting paid just like everybody else to solve problems. And one of the kinds of problems that you have to solve is when people engage in bad behavior, when they don't perform to the level that they should be performing, when their motivation for whatever reason is not where it needs to be. Well, when punishment is called for, when discipline is called for, you have to administer it. If you don't, remember what happens. The good employees will look at that and say, what am I working so hard for? Why do I bother? She doesn't even care. she lets these other folks get away with craziness. That's not okay. And now you have a very dysfunctional work environment. C, employing rewarding. So again, linking desired behaviors with employee valued outcomes. Okay, so let's make sure that what you're doing is actually going to get you a nice reward. Okay, so when you do something good, you get rewarded. And again, I will reinforce this point. You have to make sure that you know what your followers want. It says praise in private always, and sometimes in public, sometimes as a function of whether or not the employee actually wants that. Now, there's a text box there that you need to pay attention to. It says you cannot punish or discipline someone into good behavior. With punishment, what you're doing is this. You're getting them to what you hope is a neutral point, where they have stopped engaging in the bad behavior. From that point forward, you need to use positive or negative reinforcement in order to encourage the good behavior. Okay? So punishment or discipline only works to get you to a neutral point. You cannot punish someone into being good. That's not how that works. The best you can do is get them to a neutral point. Okay. 7, about halfway through the page. Managers can adopt strategies for shaping behavior as follows. They can issue a reprimand immediately following the offensive behavior and making sure to stay focused only on the current problem. This is not the opportunity to tell the person all the things they've ever done wrong. If you've ever been in a personal relationship where you've had to listen to that sort of thing, you know how frustrating it can be. You know, can we just stay focused on the present? Okay? Second, redirecting inappropriate behaviors into appropriate channels so that the person knows what he or she needs to do in order to be rewarded in the future. And then finally, once the person engages in that desirable behavior, now let's reward it. Okay, so you have the diagram there that sketches that matches up with everything that I've just been saying on this page. Okay, 8, bottom of the page. Managers can foster intrinsic outcomes, those that are experienced by individuals personally. Okay, so inside, intrinsic. By helping employees feel a greater sense of self-efficacy, remember what that is? That's task-specific self-confidence. So we can help them feel more confident. We can help them to experience a sense of accomplishment and a sense or a feeling of contributing to something that matters. People desperately want to feel intrinsically motivated. Desperately, desperately so. Top of page 7, number 9. Managers can increase motivation by redesigning work to incorporate 5 job characteristics. Okay, this is Hackman and Oldham from 1980. Now, I'm telling you right now, of all the things I've been talking about, of all the things that your book talks about, this is the most important when it comes to motivation. If you want people to be motivated, the number one thing you have to do is give them a good job. I will repeat that. If you want people to be motivated in the work setting, the number one thing that you have to do, assuming that you've hired someone who's a good fit, you have to give them a good job. If you don't give people a good job, then it's not reasonable for you to expect that they will perform at a high level. This is a no-brainer, and yet what we see time and time again is people do not create good jobs for their employees. And then they're just, I don't know why they're not motivated. Well, because their job sucks. That's why. This is not hard to figure out. Okay? So, number 1, give them a good job. What does that include? It includes, number 1, lots of skill variety, enough to draw on all the skills that person has. Second, task identity. The person has to be able to see how what they're doing contributes to the whole. So performing a complete job from beginning to end, or at least being able to see the complete job from beginning to end. Third is task significance, ensuring that what they're doing has an impact, a significant, a substantial and important impact on the organization, on other people. Fourth, autonomy. This is the freedom to choose how and when a person does a particular job. So being able to make decisions about how I'm going to do my job. Okay? And finally, feedback, which is where a person gets information on how well he or she is doing. Okay? That's what enables improvement. So, managers they can foster all of this by combining tasks, by forming identifiable work units, by establishing client relationships, increasing authority, and opening feedback channels. Each of those relates to those 5 elements of a good job. So let's take an example. Aaron Rodgers, quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. Now, whether you like the Green Bay Packers or you don't, doesn't matter. We're talking about someone who's been a spectacular player. Okay? You have to concede that. The guy is a great quarterback. So, let's diagnose his job. Let's take a look at its motivating potential. First, is there skill variety? Well, I would say the answer is yes. Now, importantly, in order to do this exercise perfectly, we would need to interview Aaron Rodgers, and unfortunately, he's not available at this moment, so I'm not able to do that. But let's just imagine that I had interviewed him, and he said, yeah, I get to use a lot of different skills. Not only his physical skills, but also his mental skills, right? Think about his whole job, not just when he's on the field, not just when he's in front of 80,000 people at Lambeau Field, but all the other things that he does for his job, the PR that he does for the job, the training that he does for the job, all of it. Okay? Task identity. Does he get to perform a complete job from beginning to end? Does he get to see how what he does contributes to goal achievement? And the answer is obviously yes. As the quarterback, it's very easy for him to see exactly how what he does contributes to the team's success or failure. Okay? Task significance. Is his job important? Does it matter? Could he just not show up? If he didn't show up, what would happen? Well, I think most people would agree that if Aaron Rodgers didn't show up, things might go pretty badly. So his task is a significant one. Autonomy. Does he have some freedom to decide how and when he does his job? Well, certainly he has to take advice from the coaches, but there are times when he's making the call right there on the field as it's happening. He ultimately decides, yep, I'm going to go with this play or not based upon how he reads that defense and so on. Finally, feedback. Does he get any feedback? Does he know how he's doing? Does he know if people think he's doing a good job? Well, this one's really easy, right? Imagine a game in Lambeau Field. If you haven't been there, you ought to go. Because a game in Lambeau Field, even if you don't like football, even if you don't like the Packers, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Trust me, it's awesome. Aaron Rodgers, back, throws. Jordy Nelson catches it in the end zone. What happens? Does the crowd politely, that was nice. That was okay. That was really good. Way to go. Aaron and Jordy. Ooh. No, of course not. They're losing it. They're all, wah! I won't scream into the mic. People are, nucks. They're throwing down their beer. They're screaming, whatever. There's a lot of positive feedback. The dude finds out exactly what people are thinking. He goes to the sideline and the coaches tell him. The other players give him feedback. Basically, the bottom line is Aaron Rodgers got a great job. Now, if you look at the model that's in the middle of the page, you'll see how these come together. So, skill variety, task identity, task significance, those are together. Together, they lead to experienced meaningfulness. So, I know my job matters. Autonomy leads to a person feeling responsible. They feel ownership because they're the ones who decided how to do the job, how to do what they were doing. So they feel responsible for what happens. And finally, feedback leads to people knowing how they're actually doing. All of those states, meaningfulness, responsibility, knowledge, lead to a whole host of positive personal and work outcomes. So giving a person a great job from their perspective, okay, remember that's important, enables them to feel these critical psychological states, which leads to lots of positive personal and work outcomes, assuming, and this is a little extra piece to the model here, that the person actually wants to accomplish those good things. That's what employee growth needs strength. The more they want that, the more those critical psychological states will lead to those outcomes. Okay, last piece on this. How do you compute a motivating potential score? Here's what I want you to pay attention to. That score is a function of the first three: skill variety, task identity, task significance. Those three added together, divided by 3, times autonomy, times feedback. Remember, with multiplicative relationships, what do we know? As soon as we have a multiplicative relationship, if any one of those elements is 0, how motivating is the job? So for example, if autonomy is 0, if a person has 0 latitude over how to do their job, somebody else tells them how to do every single thing. Everything is constrained. There is no opportunity for the person to use his or her own mind. Guess what happens to that person's motivation? Why would you expect it to be otherwise? Why should they feel responsible? They're not the ones who came up with the rules. Or the last one, if feedback was 0, they have no idea how they're doing. Well, trying to perform in a vacuum, a feedback vacuum, you have no idea if you're on task. I've been there. Trust me, it brings down your motivation. And then the very first set. If you don't get to use many skills, if you're just doing one thing over and over and over and over, blah. If you can't see how what you do connects to the overall, blah. If you can't see how what you do matters, who cares if I even show up? Blah. So basically, you got to have at least some positive associated with each of these in order to have a motivating job. And that brings me to the end of this third video.